Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Monday, April 21st, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today will be pleasant, with a high of 77.1 degrees and a low of 54.7. Coming up on today's episode, we'll examine the controversy surrounding the Defense Secretary's use of a second Signal chat account and what implications this might have for government transparency and security protocols. We'll also take a deep dive into how the Trump administration's budget cuts are transforming federal services across the country, affecting everything from social programs to infrastructure projects. These cuts are creating significant changes in how government agencies operate and deliver services to Americans. We'll break down which departments are seeing the biggest impacts and what these changes mean for citizens who rely on these services. Stay with us for these important stories. Good morning, viewers. We're turning now to a developing story about Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. According to multiple reports, the Secretary has been using private messaging apps to share sensitive military information. Joining us now is our Pentagon correspondent, Ethan. Good morning, Ethan. What can you tell us about these allegations?
Good morning, Grace. This is quite the unfolding situation. According to reporting from BBC News and CBS News, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth used a second private Signal messaging chat to share sensitive details about a military airstrike against Yemen's Houthi militants that took place last month. What makes this particularly noteworthy is that this revelation comes just 1 month after we learned about a separate Signal group where he was discussing sensitive military operations.
So this isn't the first time? Can you give us more details about what was allegedly shared in the second chat?
That's right, Grace. As CBS News has uncovered, the messages in question were sent on March 15th of this year and included specific flight schedules for American F/A-18 Hornets that were carrying out strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen. The recipients of this sensitive information included his wife Jennifer Hegseth, who is a former Fox News producer with no official Pentagon role, his brother Phil Hegseth, who works as a senior advisor at Homeland Security but is detailed to the Pentagon, and Tim Parlatore, his personal attorney.
I imagine there are rules about sharing this kind of information. What does the Pentagon say about using apps like Signal?
You've hit the nail on the head there, Grace. The Department of Defense has very clear policies that prohibit using unmanaged messaging apps like Signal for sharing operational information. According to a 2023 DoD memorandum that the Star Tribune referenced, apps such as Signal, iMessage, and WhatsApp are, quote, not authorized, end quote, to access, transmit, or process non-public DoD information. Instead, they're supposed to use authorized secure platforms, like the Army Enterprise Wicker platform, which operates within a Department of Defense Impact Level 5 security environment.
For our viewers who might not be familiar, what's the difference between classified and unclassified information in this context?
Great question. Well, there's an important distinction between classified and what they call sensitive but unclassified information, or SBU. Both categories require secure, authorized channels for communication under DoD directives. Even if information isn't technically classified, sensitive operational details still need to be protected through proper channels. It's a bit like saying your social security number isn't classified, but you still wouldn't want to share it on a public forum.
How has the White House responded to these allegations?
The White House has been dismissive of concerns, stating that no classified information was shared in either Signal group. A Defense Department spokesperson has echoed this position, even going so far as to accuse media outlets of relying on, quote, disgruntled former employees with an agenda to sabotage Hegseth and President Trump, end quote. Secretary Hegseth himself has defended his actions on social media platform X, standing by his agenda at the department.
And what about Congress? Are we seeing any reaction there?
Absolutely. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer has called for Hegseth's firing, and Senator Reid has urged the Defense Department's acting inspector general to investigate this second chat. The inspector general is already investigating Hegseth's previous use of Signal. As the AP reported through the Star Tribune, a former top Pentagon spokesperson wrote that the department was, in, quote, total chaos, end quote, which seems to be supported by Hegseth recently firing 3 top officials for what he called an, quote, unauthorized disclosure, end quote.
Thanks for that thorough report, Ethan. You've really signaled all the important details for us this morning.
Always happy to chat about it, Grace. I guess you could say I've got a secure line on Pentagon news.
Thanks, Ethan. We'll be keeping an eye on this story as it develops. Good morning, viewers. We're continuing our coverage of major policy shifts in Washington. Joining us now is our political correspondent, Chloe Davis, with more on the federal budget cuts under the Trump administration. Chloe, what can you tell us about the scope of these cuts?
Grace, according to reporting from Perplexity, the Trump administration has proposed slashing funding to approximately 2,600 federal programs, creating a ripple effect of disruptions across government services nationwide. These cuts are affecting everything from rural airport funding to senior services like Meals on Wheels, essentially touching almost every corner of local government operations.
That's quite extensive. I understand one program in particular is facing immediate consequences.
Absolutely, Grace. The situation with AmeriCorps is particularly alarming. Just this month, over 2,000 AmeriCorps National Civilian Community Corps volunteers received notice they'll be dismissed by April 30th. That's just 9 days from now. These volunteers were told their dismissal was due to, and I quote, programmatic circumstances beyond your control, following a review by the newly established Department of Government Efficiency, or DOLG.
I imagine this must be having real-world impacts on communities these volunteers serve.
The impacts are immediate and severe. In Philadelphia, as Perplexity reports, NCCC volunteers repairing homes damaged by Hurricane Ida were laid off a week early, leaving residents with unfinished repairs. I spoke with one resident, Francine Flemings, who now has unresolved structural issues and water damage in her home, with no clear path to completion. Similar disruptions to disaster relief, housing repairs, and conservation projects are happening nationwide.
This seems to be part of a longer-term approach to AmeriCorps. Can you provide some context?
You've hit the nail on the head, Grace. During Trump's first term from 2017 to 2021, his administration repeatedly proposed eliminating AmeriCorps entirely. Congress rejected those earlier attempts, maintaining the program's roughly $1 billion annual budget. What's different now is that the administration has managed to implement significant cuts through executive action rather than the legislative process.
And there's a new department involved in these decisions, correct? Can you shed some light on DOGE?
The Department of Government Efficiency, or DOG, was established by executive order on January 20th of this year. According to Perplexity, it's not a traditional federal agency, but rather a cross-departmental initiative aimed at reducing federal spending by targeting what they call waste, fraud, and abuse. Interestingly, this initiative partly emerged from discussions between President Trump and Elon Musk. While DOGE doesn't have explicit legislative authority to terminate programs directly, it's been instrumental in identifying federal programs for review and reduction.
How are these cuts affecting cities with large federal workforces?
The impact is particularly acute in federal hubs like Kansas City. Perplexity reports that layoffs and furloughs of federal workers and contractors have created a domino effect, disrupting not just government services, but also local economies. Reduced consumer spending from affected workers is straining social support systems. Local leaders and county officials have expressed serious concerns that these cuts threaten essential services their communities depend on.
What about the broader economic picture, Chloe?
The fiscal outlook is concerning, Grace. Economic analyses suggest the combined effect of tax cuts and spending reductions could increase federal deficits by trillions of dollars over a decade. While tax cuts might boost GDP modestly in the short term, the long-term projection indicates possible negative effects on economic growth, wages, and capital formation. Most troublingly, if cuts target safety net programs like Medicaid and SNAP, lower-income households will bear the heaviest burden, potentially widening inequality.
Thank you for that comprehensive breakdown, Chloe. I guess you could say these budget cuts are leaving many Americans dodging essential services they once relied on.
That's right, Grace, and unfortunately, there's nothing amusing about this particular DOGE.
Thanks again for your reporting, Chloe. We'll continue to follow this developing story. Here are some other headlines. Following the death of Pope Francis on Easter Monday, April 21st, at the age of 88, the process to elect his successor is now underway at the Vatican. Cardinals under the age of 80 from around the world are gathering for the papal conclave, a centuries-old tradition held in seclusion within the Sistine Chapel. They will cast secret ballots, needing a two-thirds majority to elect the next leader of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. White smoke from the chapel chimney will eventually signal a successful election, followed by the traditional announcement, Habemus Papam, we have a Pope, from St. Peter's Basilica. Pope Francis, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Argentina, was a transformative figure, a first pope from the Americas and the Jesuit order. Elected in 2013, he chose the name Francis, symbolizing his focus on humility, peace, and the poor, notably living in a guest house rather than the apostolic palace. His papacy emphasized mercy, environmental stewardship through his encyclical Laudato Si, and outreach to marginalized groups. He vocally advocated for migrants, criticizing harsh immigration policies, and encouraged greater acceptance of LGBTQ+ individuals, famously asking, "Who am I to judge?" These efforts, however, drew significant opposition from conservative factions within the church. Turning to baseball, controversy flared during Sunday's Yankees-Rays game at Tampa's temporary Steinbrenner Field. In the top of the eighth inning, Yankee star Aaron Judge launched a ball deep down the left field line. It was ruled foul by the third base umpire. Despite a video review, the call was controversially upheld, denying Judge what would have been his eighth homer of the season. Both Judge and manager Aaron Boone expressed frustration, with Boone being ejected after arguing following Judge's subsequent strikeout. Judge noted the lower-than-standard foul poles at the temporary park might have contributed to the call, raising questions about playing official games in such venues. And a deadly storm system brought severe weather to Oklahoma and Texas over the weekend. Beginning Saturday, the slow-moving system, fueled by a strengthening low-pressure area, unleashed heavy rain, large hail, and multiple tornadoes. Tragically, at least 2 deaths were confirmed in Oklahoma, including a 12-year-old boy swept away by floodwaters. A dramatic tornado was also filmed near Hico, Texas. The severe weather threat extended into the Midwest on Easter Sunday, impacting states like Missouri and Arkansas, with warnings for more tornadoes and damaging winds. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.